Recognizing that in the last few years, substantial new monies have gone into public education, what should the state's first priority be with regards to public education funding? What would your response be to that perennial call? We hear it all the time, calling not only for more money, but more new money, ongoing money.
Well, we've heard the call, and when I came into office, the first thing I did was stop the cutting. We worked with the legislature and said, you cannot continue to cut education. That's our seed corn. That's our rising generation of leadership. And so we quit cutting. We focused on growing the economy, which produces additional revenue without having to raise taxes. And we've been able to produce additional revenue now. It's about $1.8 billion of new money, K through 16, over these last 5 years. That's the more money than we've ever been put into education, public education in our history. That being said, I certainly believe in local control. We've tried to put more money in the weighted pupil unit, which is the local unit, where our local school districts have the ability to disperse the money as they see fit, whether they want to have smaller classroom sizes, increase teacher salaries, pay for resources, embrace technology. That money ought to be put back as low as we can into the local school districts through the WPU. We have that tug of war with the legislatures for deciding, what's the best way to fund. But the good news is we've put a lot of new money into education.
Jonathan Johnson.
To say we haven't raised taxes for education is just not right. Last year we raised property taxes specifically related to education. It's important that we fund education. But everyone should know that last year our state auditor, John Frugal Dougal, and if that's your name, you're destined to be a state auditor, said that we do not know in Utah where all of our education funding goes. Our priority in education funding should be to make sure that the money we're spending gets to the classroom. A few weeks ago, I was in a meeting with the superintendent of the Granite School District. Very proud that 65% of the funds in the Granite School District make it to the classroom. Said that was number 1 or 2 among the districts in the state. 65% is way too low. And if that's number 1 or 2, how is it happening in number 40 and 41? Priority ought to be to make sure the money we spend gets to the classroom where teachers are boots on the ground teaching our children.
Governor Herbert.
Well, everybody would agree with what Jonathan just said there. I think we've got local elected officials, which that is their responsibility, our local school district, to spend the money. If we don't like how they're spending it, we don't like how they're hiring the superintendents, the principals, then we ought to replace them at the ballot box. That's how the system works. We have smaller percentage of overhead and administrative of any state in America today. We are doing very good in getting the money into the classroom. Can we do better? I'm sure we're not perfect, so we probably can do better. But that accountability is held by the elected officials that we put in office.
Do you care for a rebuttal? Okay. Boyd.
Okay, we're going to stay on the education question. And interestingly, this question came in multiple times, and it's very short. We'll see if your answers are the same. Would you keep or get rid of Common Core?
I'll answer that very directly. I think we need to get rid of Common Core. Common Core, while initially put together by states, frankly has been hijacked by the federal government. It is a one-size-fits-all solution that our State Board of Education has put in place. The contract for it was signed by our governor. It's put in place, and so all 600,000+ students in Utah are told what to study, and they're all told to take the SAGE test. That is not local control. We should have it so that each school district can approve its own studies, its own standards. Standards are wonderful. What we measure improves, and what we measure and report improves remarkably. Standards are important, but let school districts approve set their standards, and then let our state school board do what it's required to under the state constitution, provide general oversight, not specific mandates of Common Core.
Governor Herbert.
If we define Common Core as the federal mandate to tell us what to teach and how to teach it, we're all opposed to it. The embracement of standards is done by our elected officials under our state constitution by the state school board. If we don't like the standards, we need to have them change it. We've worked with our Attorney General to review that, to say, have we somehow ceded that ability to control our own destiny when it comes to standards? And the answer is no. The curriculum, on the other hand, is done by the local school boards. They're not the same. If we don't like the curriculum, we can change that with our local school boards. The Deseret News just had an article yesterday about Davis County and how they're changing the curriculum when it comes to math. So we're not beholden to the federal government. The SAGE testing is something that our state school board came up with. It has nothing to do with the Common Core. Again, we are in control from top to bottom of our educational experience. And the question ought to be, are the standards good? Do we like the standards? That ought to be what we ought to be looking at and seeing if we like the standards. We had President Matt Holland and a commission look at the standards. They said, you know what we have is pretty good. They made some suggestions of making it better, which have been adopted by, guess who? Our state school board elected by the people.
So here's what I would say to that. Our Attorney General, when he studied whether we have control of education, said that our math and our English language arts standards are wholesale adopted from the Common Core standards. We talk about our state school board being in charge. How is our state school board elected? Historically, it's been a Byzantine process. It's about as complicated as picking the Pope. A commission appointed by the governor selects names that the governor then picks 2 of his favorites to be on the ballot. The governor has plenty of control over the state school board and what it's done.
You know, the funny thing about that is that the people have said that we picked 2 conservative people on the school board and not enough in favor of public education. So just the contrary of what's been illustrated is what's taken place. We've had a good balance. We've had good school board members. They're elected by the people. They have a responsibility under our state constitution. If you don't like the standards, then I suggest you run for the state school board. That's where you can make a big difference. Our outcomes are great, and that ought to be the key issue. Our graduation rates are up. Our NAEP scores are up. We're in 8th grade. We're 11th in math. We're 10th in reading language arts, and we're 7th in science. Our minority scores are up. We're doing very good, and the outcomes are what's important about this whole issue. What are the outcomes? Are they good? They're very good.